All right, and welcome to the inaugural episode of The Money Shot. He's Clemo, I'm Josh, and we're here to talk today mainly about the AFL because it's September and traditionally the year of, well, when the finals played, usually last day in September, but we move with the times. How are you doing today, Clemo?
Once in September every 5 years now. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm excited. This is
I'm a
exciting.
traditionalist. It's hard to break habits. It was always been one day in September. Now it's kind of once in a while in September.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's good.
so first, we're going to chat about the hubs. So we've had the majority of this, well, almost all the season in the hubs. And back in April, they were called an extreme option by Gill. And I think this is arguably the most difficult season to win the premiership with all the travel involved. And also, there's not really a lot of home ground advantage for most teams.
Well, difficult for who? Like that's question one. It was an extreme case he talked about, but I mean it's kind of an extreme scenario that we're living in at the moment. But really, I feel like it's the most even year that we could have possibly had with the AFL.
Yes, that's what I'm saying is that because, like, for example, me being a Geelong supporter, we can pencil in 8, 9 wins a year that will get down at Cardinia Park,
Yeah,
or GMHBA, or also known as Alphabet Stadium. We know that, well, as a Geelong supporter, we know that there's a high chance they're going to have their wins boosted. Whether they're a decent team or not, they've got to have a lot of wins boosted. And for example, when I don't know your Fremantles of the world and whoever else come to MCG and play Richmond, and they don't get on the MCG very much, there's a little bit of an advantage for a lot of Melbourne-based teams getting to play a lot of games at home. So the home ground advantage factor is kind of gone as well, even for the local teams with Brisbane, because most teams have been playing on the Gabba every other week for the past couple of months.
yeah. Because after 3 or 4 weeks, even if that, those teams are caught up. Like a team, even like North Melbourne or whoever, they've figured out how to play on the ground at that point, and it's no longer advantage to any team in particular. I think the only advantage is like some of the Queensland teams or the Adelaide teams or the Western Australia teams is that they get to go home after their training session. They don't go back to a hotel and just hang out with their teammates the entire
I mean,
time.
if this were us and we were at Mantra or a resort and I didn't have to like do any housekeeping, I would be more than happy to go to Queensland. And just some of the impact that's had for Queensland with the economy after COVID is what it's meant for Queensland business. 101,000 bed nights spent in Queensland hotels and resorts by players, officials, and families. 400,000 meals for all those people. 10,000 rental days for cars and trucks to move people and equipment around. 950 bus trips. I don't know who's catching the bus in the AFL, but 950. Oh, I guess they're the
No,
coaches.
they have to bus them from hotel to
Yeah,
ground.
they're not scanning their marquee exactly. 120 charter flights in and out of Queensland, rental of 10 gyms, 18 sporting grounds, and 5 recovery centres. So I guess, was it the right thing for the Queensland government to let them in?
Absolutely. If I knew you were going to come at me with all that information, I would have given you the single shot. I would have let you hold the camera. It
Look,
would have been all
I'm a team
yours.
player. I'm a team player. I don't want all the spotlight on me. It's not all about me. Um, but I know that up north, because obviously this is filmed in, well, the former Southern capital, and they've gotten a lot of grief, I guess, because they haven't let a lot of other people in, but people like um, I can't remember the actor's name, but a lot of people, it seems, if you're in show business or some sort of professional, you've been allowed in. But has it been worth it? I guess is the question.
Well, the difference is between just letting celebrities or anything like that get in is that, I mean, this is literally bringing money in to a state which otherwise would be losing money. And now they're, um, I wouldn't say they're getting more because you still can't have a bunch of like too many fans of these games. So you'd be earning more by, even if you are the Gold Coast or Brisbane, you'd still be earning more by having a full crowd show up at the Gather, or three quarters of the crowd show up at the Gather.
I mean, like the spotlight and the press that the AFL has gotten in a growth market, because Gold Coast are a new team, and the promotion. So the holding the grand final there, which is a whole nother decision, is they've gotten the government to actually spend a lot of money putting up banners and promotions and promoting the game up there. And while it's still costing a lot of money for the hub to being up there, the exposure in a traditionally rugby state has to be invaluable. And I've seen on some social media people I used to know, I knew from London, that live in Brisbane, and how much they've enjoyed having all the AFL around and getting to go to games. And I'm so jealous when I see them drinking a frothy, sitting like on the fence. Someone I met of all places on a tour in Morocco, going to the desert, lives in Brisbane, and she's had a great time. When you think about what it's been like for Brisbane the past 10 years, the amount of times that the dark days have got where they couldn't retain players and they've gone other places. Same with Gold Coast to an extent as well. But the turnaround, I think, shows, and this is a nice segue into our next segment with North Melbourne, is that things can change in a hurry. Things were pretty dark and pretty bleak. They were getting blown off the park every week, and they were traveling a long way to do it as well. So you can just imagine getting on the plane, knowing that we're going to get belted, and we're going to have to spend 3-4 hours on the plane to then go home again. So it just shows you how quick things can turn around. But before we move on to that, the hub itself, can it be done in 2021 again?
As in, if COVID is still happening.
Well, I don't think COVID kind of says, "Oh, you guys have had enough now. That's enough." I don't. It's not like a suspension. You've served your time, or I just think that going by what people have said with vaccines, it's not. It's not like it's happening soon, even a rollout. So factoring in that, let's say the borders do open for other places, and let's say that COVID could spread again very quickly. Well, where a hub could be in a different spot, like we could be talking about a hub in Tasmania, like it's you don't know, like if the border comes down, COVID could quite easily spread. But let's just say that Queensland is fine. Could they do this again?
I think the AFL are more likely to. I think they're more likely to have different groups. You got some echo happening on your end.
Uh,
I'd say they're more likely to split off different hubs, have multiple. But I think you would have like 6 teams in Western Australia, 6 teams in Adelaide, 6 teams in Brisbane, something like that. Have all the teams play each other, and then get them to move around, or maybe after 3 rounds, move 3 of the teams out. However they do it, they would try and spread the love, so to speak. I think that's more likely.
About having, considering that, let's just say there can't be crowds again. What do you think about New Zealand hub?
I would probably go against it only because now, right now, it's easier to try and figure out the logistics of getting teams interstate. Imagine trying to get them into another country, depending on where New Zealand is and depending on where Australia is.
If New Zealand's fine and it's a fly in, fly out scenario.
You could, but what is that benefit? For instance, even if, let's say the AFL and you worry about your costs, right? Getting everyone over to New Zealand, the costs involved in getting that is so much different to getting people from Victoria to Queensland. Like I feel
True.
like I think logistically, it just there's more chances for things to go wrong in that scenario than just moving people from interstate.
Mm, mm. Okay. All right. Well, our next thing that we were going to next thing on the agenda, North Melbourne, Danny. Take it away.
It really is the good, bad, and the ugly, isn't it? Like it is just a horror show, and
I thought you'd appreciate that theme.
yeah, I did. It's pretty good. Um, nah, it's honestly it's frustrating. I mean, the team that North Melbourne has this year is not that different to last year, but they look very different on the field. Um, I don't know. There's so many different ways to go here. Whether you want to talk about the coaching, whether you want to talk about the players, whether you
Well, let's start with some of the players. So I don't think it's all bad with their list. I mean, you've got Taron Thomas, Zerha, Simpkin. They're all quality prospects, and you've still got some vets. You got Higgins, Goldstein, Zeeble, and Taron. They've got experience. You know, they can show pros the way. I think that what's interesting, you just mentioned the list hasn't changed a lot, but the results have changed a lot. So what's that telling you about their high performance program? Because they had some of the worst injuries in the league. Um, and so I think that some of the staff that they've put in this year, and I think is it Ben Buckley? I
yeah
think Ben Buckley that hand out the contract. There's got to be some accountability for some of the people he's appointed. Because when you look at their performance, North ranked last for score and goal inside 50 percentage. And you know the ball movement. I know you avoided watching a lot, and I could understand why. But the ball didn't come in very well, and
no.
the delivery for Ben Brown was didn't help. But Ben Brown finished. Do you know how many goals he finished with?
He what anywhere between maybe 15 and 20.
He had 8 goals from 9 games.
Yeah, because of
So
okay.
it's not like while Ben Brown has some part in the performance, the delivery I think determines a lot of your success of your forwards. And if it's coming in a terrible way, he can't do much about it. So some of the other thing is that their delistings turning over 11 players. That says a lot about what you thought about your list from the outset. That seems a significant change.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to remember with the listings. With the listings, every club has to delist a certain amount from their list before you go into the draft and free agency and all that. You have to have a certain amount of players on your list before you can go into that. So I would actually suggest about probably 2/3 of these guys will actually come back. They'll be
Who
picked
have you
up
got coming
again.
back?
Who's not?
Who have you got coming back? Let's forget the people leaving. Who have we got coming back?
So of the list, I think Marley Williams will come back. Lockie Hosey will come back. Tom Murphy will come back. Majak will come back. Paul O'Hearn will come back. And Pittard and McMillan are on the fence at the moment. See, the weird thing with McMillan, I think it's almost considering retirement time for him, which is really strange because I wouldn't have said that a year ago. Reason being, one, he's our vice captain, so we just delisted our vice captain. So
Here's the other thing. I think it was 2 or 3 members of the leadership group got delisted.
yeah, so I believe Pittard is one of them as well. He's part of the leadership group, and who was the other one? I'm not sure who the other one was, but I think there's guys like Mason Wood I think it's just time is up for him. He was always in the rumours in off season, always to be traded somewhere, and we've convinced him to stay, and he just can't get enough game time. And the problem is that he's your medium forward that you tend to have, which is fine. And he and Zerha are that medium forward type role. The problem is that it's not a like for like, because what Zerha does as a medium forward is totally different to Wood. Wood plays more like a lead up forward. Zerha is a bash and crash. Like, he'll go into a pack and try and destroy the pack and hopefully mark it, but he'll also tackle and chase. Wood leads up like a centre half forward, and he'll corral and stuff like that, but he doesn't put on that forward pressure, and that's why I think he's just going to slowly go away. I'd rather try guys out like Lockie Hosey, just to see where they go, because I think Woods.
So what about their free agent targets? Aiden Corr's been the one who's walked away from the club. Zach Williams is a prospect. And they do have 2 picks inside the top 10. Do you trade in young talent, or do you start from the beginning?
You never start from the beginning. One of the worst things that Melbourne did back in the day was getting rid of all their veteran leadership. So, because what it basically stuck them with was a bunch of kids trying to lead each other for 10 years, and it just doesn't work. You need a group that is veterans, ones that are like 25 to 30 years of age, that have played in 100 to 150 games, and then you bring in your younger guys. Now, we have guys in all of those areas at the moment, but what you'll see is that guys like McMillan, Pittard, Jacobs, Wood, Dorr, like a lot of these guys are the ones that are in that middle bracket, like 100 to 150 games, but they're not getting games consistently. So if you're got guys in that range that aren't playing every week, then you might as well try a younger guy. And I think that's what this is kind of showing. Like, it's not what...
Yeah, so Reece Shaw set the finals as the pass mark, and they started the season 2-0, as hard as that is to believe. And they fell apart figuratively and literally, with a league worst injury rate. I haven't drank that much. To lose 14 of their last 15 games.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, what grade do you give their season?
Ooh, we're doing grades. It's an F. It's absolutely an F. Because the difference is that it's fine to lose games as long as you have a game plan in place. And I've said to you many times, the reason why there's so many games later in the year, and there's a reason why it started to stop watching later in the year, is because they were doing the same thing week in, week out, and the changes they were making, they were just doing like for like. They weren't really... They were trying to hedge their bets everywhere, and when you hedge your bets everywhere, you're not doing anything anywhere. And that is what was frustrating. And I just think they lacked the direction they wanted to go in. And that's what causes them to lose. And that's why it's a fail, because if you're Reece Shaw, you set up the club at the end of last year, it's like, this is the way we're going to play. And even in those first 2 weeks watching those games, we sort of played like that, but you could tell that there wasn't a lot of movement. It was relying on just being hard nosed, and then that went away. Like that, because everyone else just realized, if they're just gonna come hard nosed at us, we'll just get the ball first and beat them on the outside, because all they were focusing on was getting to the ball, but there's no game plan or movement as to when you get the ball, or
Yeah.
which people do we send in to get the ball and have these other guys do something else rather than throwing four guys at one spot on the ground and having them surrounded by enemies.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that begs the question of their future. Now I know that I can see. I think your jacket is North Melbourne at the moment,
Yeah.
and you're going to have certain feelings that may be less than objective about this. And so previously, there's been talk of them moving, and overcrowded in Melbourne. And so I think they should consider their options. So I've run the numbers, and a North Melbourne's revenue is similar. So AFL Tasmania task force, because they've wanted a team for ages, has worked out that the revenue would be about 42.5 million, which is actually the average of similar sized clubs of North, GWS, Brisbane, Gold Coast, and St Kilda. And it could potentially add 19 million into the TV rights deal. So at the moment, North's members are about 38,000 at the moment. Yeah, 38,000. And the average match day attendance, if they were playing in Tassie, would be about 18,500. Now, if you combine the support that still exists in Melbourne and the ability to sell Melbourne-based memberships like the Cats do, and they could easily have 60,000 members combined, and this factors in losing 10% of their Melbourne-based members. So if you're thinking long term about being able to contend, having the money and resources to contend, and also having kind of a heartland of players who you won't have the go home factor, should they be looking at their longer term future, especially with like what's happened with COVID and what do you think, Dan?
I mean, you have brought the stats today, but now I get it. One of my things I always think about is they talk about with North games that are played down in Tasmania, how they're always such like great attendance, which they are. They basically sell out they sell out like the 3 or 4 games that they get per year there. My thing is if you start to dilute the amount of games that you play down there, do you start getting that itch from everybody playing, coming to watch? Do they start to say, well, I won't go this week because we have a game next week that we can go watch, right? So it becomes less of an event to say, oh, we've only got 3 chances to go watch a game in Hobart. Let's put those on the calendar and go watch those games too. All right, now you have 11 games, and then you can pick and choose, and you still might only go to 3 games that year, but it gets spread out.
But in saying that, even if they say had 3 of their home games at Docklands for their Melbourne-based supporters, then it'd so only be 8 over the course of a whole season at home, kind of like Geelong's model.
Yeah, but I would you split it? I don't know if you'd split it that way.
It's not an even split, but there could be some sort of split they could work out.
Also, is Hawthorn still going to Launceston in this scenario?
That deal expires at the end of next year.
Right, so do they pick that up? Because I bet you Hawthorn's not going to be happy not getting the money to go down there if it becomes, all right, we're just going to have one team in Tassie and that's their place.
Well, the thing is that the state government has to actually pay to get the teams to come down there, and it costs them 19 million a year to do that. So
For both?
combined, yeah. So if they no longer had to pay 19 million and got the economic benefits, there's an estimation of I think 360 new permanent jobs, but then that doesn't count all the staff that the club would employ over there. And also the long-term future of the club, they've got 38,000 members, right? 38,500 members. And they're not doing, it's not too bad. But if they really do, they want to be a club that's going to make up the numbers, kind of like English Premier League soccer, or do they actually want to compete for premierships? Because you need your own patch to compete. I've watched a lot of YouTube lately, and you see back in the day finals turns up where when Dee Laney was coaching North, or even when Brad Scott was coaching North, they can get to kind of prelim level, preliminary final level, but they'd never really been a top 3 contender in a long, long time.
No,
Um,
they get knocked out for that. Even those years that we did make the prelim in 2014 and 15, like I think we came from out of the 8 to get to those prelim positions anyway. No, the out of the top 4.
so it's not just paying your players the salary cap, it's scouting and it's your team facilities. It's everything to attract free agents and keep people.
See, our
And
facilities are actually really good. That's not an issue. So my thing that I've always thought of is that what North Melbourne should do with clubs like Bulldogs and whatnot is I've always just hoped that there was a another club in another ground in Melbourne that they could update and have as like a boutique stadium for those clubs to play in. Because the Marvel Stadium deal, even though the channels,
Princess Park.
even though AFL own majority or all of the stadium rights now, I haven't heard things in the news saying how it's made deals for North Melbourne and Bulldogs and that better since they've taken it over. Like I'm sure it has, but nobody's like waving the AFL flag saying like this has been amazing. So I still think there is an issue with those small clubs at those grounds, and something like a boutique stadium in Melbourne would be so much more beneficial to have basically a Gold Coast sized stadium, even less, like 30,000 seat stadium, 35,000, and then you can play those games there, especially when the AFL like to, because you can tell that they hate having a North Melbourne versus Bulldogs game on a Friday night at Marvel, because the best you're ever going to get is between say 35 to 40,000 people in that stadium.
Mm.
So why not have a smaller stadium? Costs you less, and you can sell it out, and it's cheaper for everyone.
The way they've designed GWS's and Gold Coast Stadium is a testament to what you're saying, where they've been designed to have you only need a low numbers of people come to break even on your costs. You
I think
see that
a couple of years ago, the Giants only needed to have about 7,000 people rock up to break even on the game.
yeah, I still remember it was like 6, but yeah, you get the point. And it's a similar sort of pricing model, even though it's an older stadium. Down at Geelong, it's a similar model where the reason that they can make quite a lot of money is because they don't have that third level of stand and all the other things that go with that. And it makes me think of Adelaide Oval, Hilux Hill, that end of the stadium where they don't really have seating because it's part of the ground that people don't. Everyone wants to sit in the wing, so
Yeah.
they've taken the approach of, well, we won't even build that part of the stadium. And they've kind of got like the level 1 seating for the supporters down there, and that's about it. So I think that maybe Princess Hill is an option because that's kind of in your turf. Okay, and a revelation this season, and they've certainly been a beneficiary of how things have gone for them up in Brisbane, is the Lions, and to a lesser extent, the Suns. So, in a year where membership for a lot of clubs has gone down with COVID, and a lot of people have experienced a lot of pain with COVID, but Brisbane's membership's actually up 4.2% on last year, from 28,023 people to 29,277. So for a club that's gone through hard times recently, they've managed to finish 14-3, second place finish, home final at the Gabba, which they haven't lost at since last September. And has there been a better season for them since 2004?
Just not the last day in September, am I right?
Well, since last year, they haven't lost at the Gabba since last September. So they probably didn't finish last season very well. But this year, what grade would we give their season based on what they've done so far?
You give them an A. Um, I mean, I'm just bringing up the ladder now. They only finished, two games behind their record last year, and it was a season shortened by 5 games.
Yeah. Mm.
But
I
you
think
don't. I think they still have to. I mean, they finished second last year. They finished second this year. They need to progress. I think they need to make a grand final for it to be a win. I would say.
I think they missed out on top spot by percentage.
Yeah.
And for any club, I think outside of the Eagles, for any club that finishes on top of the ladder it's still a major achievement if the Eagles do it, but they've just got they've got all the resources. Brisbane's one of the most in depth clubs of the AFL, along with St Kilda. They owe a lot of money, so success on the field is really important. And
Could I also point out last year they finished second based on percentage as well. So
okay, so
two,
they've
two
backed
years.
it up.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
backed it up.
you see the development of like Hipwood, for example, and it's not just the development of some of the young guns they got coming through; it's the retention of players. I feel like previously a Charlie Cameron would have left, um, but also getting in a free agent signing like Lockie Neal, who could, very strong chance to win the Brownlow. They were not attracting free agents. They couldn't hang on to anyone. I think there was a year they lost 6 or 7 players who just had there was the go home factor.
Yeah, that was Pollock, that was Yo, that was a whole bunch of But it's amazing how much your fortunes change when you start winning.
Rockcliffe.
Like speaking as a North supporter, when we were making prelims, we were getting guys coming in like Higgins and stuff. Now even though we have a bunch of money this off season, it's going to be hard to be able to draw free agents into North because when you're not winning, it's not enticing unless you're going to pay the big bucks. Right now, Brisbane are winning. Everything's kind of helped them. The fact that they get to be in Brisbane all year, pretty much, in terms of just being able to still be home with your family and play, I think is great for in terms of a mental state.
Mm. Yeah, they've certainly, but that's the thing. I think that us as Victorians we take for granted is even though the MCG isn't either of our team's home grounds per se, it's still a home of sorts and
Yeah.
something they're familiar with. And it's certainly a taste for Victorian clubs about what it's like to have to be interstate most of the year, which we claim to understand, but we really don't know what the lived experience is like. I mean, there are certainly there are weeks I know in the ideal schedule you'd be playing at home 1 week, away the next, and you'd break it up. But there would have to be weeks where you're traveling 2 weeks in a row, and given how big our country is, like, you compare that to, say, the NBA, it's like having to do an East Coast trip and a West Coast trip on back-to-back weeks, for 1 game. It wouldn't be easy. And
Well,
I yeah. Mm.
I was going to say, sorry, I know Brisbane have obviously had a good, but as a little shout out to Freo and West Coast, who always have the worst travelling, right? They play 12 games at home a year, and then they're travelling at least half the country to go play elsewhere.
I'd love to know how many miles West Coast and Freo rack up over the year. That's
compared to this year.
I don't have today. But I think I know from here to Sydney, it's just under 1,000 kilometers. It's like 900 kilometers.
Yeah.
So, and it's that so much further to Perth from here. So you think most trips, I honestly, let's just say, I don't know, is it 2,500 kilometers from here to Melbourne to Perth? Something like that.
That's a Google job.
Yeah, that's a job. But whatever it is, we know it's still 3.5, 4 hour flight each way.
Yep.
So in any given week, well, every week that's a traveling week, not counting time to and from the airport, that's 8 hours.
Yeah. And
And
that's actually an interesting. Now that I'm thinking about it even a little bit more. Also, I've just looked it up. It's 3,500 k to from Melbourne to Perth.
okay, yeah, okay. Well, that's far, isn't it?
Yeah, but another thing with this, even places like the Melbourne clubs being stuck in Brisbane, therefore they are travelling less as well. Do you think?
Yeah, well, it's all circumstantial, and this circles back to, oh, excuse me.
Mind you, the
Um,
bubble, the hub didn't start until a few weeks after everything came back. Technically,
I mean,
like
we got in 1 or 2 games.
yeah, down here before they
Oh,
went up.
no, it was like 1 game.
Oh yeah, you might be right. I can look it up while you're talking.
Because Geelong went to Sydney, got belted by, I think, the Giants, which wasn't indicative of the seasons that we're gonna have. Which, I can't say I was feeling optimistic, but, yeah, I think this is people are saying, "Oh, this year hardly counts," but I think this is a really equal year because by and large, you don't Gold Coast aren't in the run, and the only team like, okay, so West Coast and Adelaide's have gotten a few games at home, but outside of that, everyone's gotten to play on the Gabba a lot, and at Metricon a lot, and it's been a lot of neutral games. So I think this year the premiership's worth a little bit more than previous years because you've had to do it on the road the whole time.
Yeah, you are right. I'm just looking. You played Melbourne in round 4. You played them at the MCG, and then you played Gold Coast. Gold Coast was in Geelong, so that's at least round 5. You played there. Then you played Brisbane. Who knew that would have been a time? Huh?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, and then you played Brisbane in Sydney. So yeah, for round 6 onwards, essentially, everyone was interstate.
so I think that you gave them an A.
I give them an A.
I don't think apart from they missed the top by percentage. They've done everything they can with their resources they've had. I'm giving them an A plus based on their regular season. We'll see how they go week 1 of the finals, but based on their regular season, other circumstances and everything to do with it, I think we couldn't have asked much more.
See, this is why I was kind of hoping that we waited until the end of the season, because if they go out in straight sets, it changes to me.
Well, you know how you have a regular season MVP and a playoff MVP? We're talking about the regular season at the moment. We can only talk about what's happened.
That's true.
And yeah, I think we'll give credit where credit's due, and we'll keep moving. So our next one.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Ching, ching, bling, bling. Cut the tap.
Okay. So Greater Western Sydney. So how times have changed. Almost this day to the day last year, I was in Thailand with my beautiful ex sitting at Aussie Bar in Phuket, cheering on the Giants to beat Richmond. It's amazing how quick things can change. And yes, I'm talking about footy. So memberships dropped by about 3,000 members, and it's down about 28% for AFL Sydney in general. The Swans having a down year. How do you see their season before we deep dive into this?
You went from playing in the premiership to not making the 8. That's a hard fall.
When I'm thinking about like this time last year, I'm in footy shorts in a singlet drinking bintangs, thinking that they're like Richmond obviously had an advantage. They had an advantage at the MCG, but all the guns in GWS is 22, the Giants 22, to score, I think it was 3 or 4 goals on grand final. is I don't care who you are. I don't even care if it's Hawthorn. That is pathetic. And it like even if you look at like when Port Adelaide got absolutely nailed by Geelong in the 2007 grand final, they still put 7 or 8 goals on the board. Like it's not a much, but it's not like the game ended at quarter time. And I remember in that game just thinking back to how far. The reason I bring it up is because they've dropped so much from that point to now. They I think they finished 10th,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
their brand of footy was absolutely shit. That I watched it. Like they were boring. I turned it over. They were boring to watch. And so you look at the way they played and some of the things. So in 2020, they at stoppages, they were fine. They had that grit and grind, obviously, strategy. But in from stoppages and clearances, they were close to last. They didn't benefit from many entries going into their forward 50. They ranked 16th for inside 50s. This is a team that was in the grand final 12 months ago, and you'll see they've GWS ranked top 4 for generating scores and goals from inside their 50, but they just couldn't get it there. Their contested ball work was inconsistent to previous years. So their best performance this year was actually in round 8 against Richmond. The irony. Um, but it was actually a strength. And offensively, they were the worst team in the competition for moving the ball from end to end. I can't remember many times where I saw them go coast to coast this year with the ball. And too many times they would kick it down the line or down the wing, and that has to be coaching. They've obviously been told we are not going through the corridor, and
Do you think? So sorry, I'll let you finish.
yeah, and you see, like there was a game on the weekend where it's obviously not about the Giants, but Geelong went in and they were playing shithouse. That is a word to describe it. They were playing shithouse, right? And they were on the left forward flank, and I think it was Henderson. He kicked it right down the guts of the ground, and it went over a marking contest. But he kicked it basically to the center circle, and the commentary was, "Oh, that was a really high risk kick." But the thing is, it resulted in a Geelong goal, and it could have easily have resulted in who were they playing again? The Swans, a Swans goal. But it's risk and reward, and it's just like investing or even gambling to an extent. With no risk, there is no reward. And GWS kicking it down the line is they're giving the opposition, a chance to set up and to get numbers back and defend. So how are you giving your forwards a chance if there's 20 blokes in your forward 50 because you move the ball so slowly? And you look at the people that they've got through their midfield and the forwards that they could be kicking to. When you've got Finlayson, you've got Cameron, you've got so many blokes that you could kick to. And then you've also got like the studs guy, Toby Green. Yeah. And they've got all these players and all this talent, and I just don't feel like they're using it. And they also ranked in the bottom 4 for allowing the opposition to move the ball the length of the field. So not only are they not moving it quick, but they're allowing the opposition to move it quick. And this gets to the next problem, their salary cap problems.
Well, can I just make a quick comment before you get to the salary cap stuff?
I guess you can say something.
Do we think that going from last season into this season, that people maybe overlook some of the negatives because of some things did fall their way? You got to remember, so last year they finished 6th. They weren't a top 4 team by come end of the season, and they hit their stride. They make the grand final and put in one of the worst performances, at least I've ever seen since I've been around. It was one of the lowest scores as well, and there were some really bad scores back in the old days. And then they've come into this season and they've dropped to 10th. Because I was going to make a joke that they've dropped as many spots as North did, but I forgot that they finished in 6th, so it actually probably was about the same. So like, do we just kind of have this thing in our mind that because they made the grand final, therefore they're a top 2 team necessarily? Like they're listed
think
top 2 team,
they're
or
right.
injuries coming into it?
Their list dictates the expectation. And you see that the talent that they've let go of because of their salary cap, which we'll get to next. But the thing about GWS that really frustrates me the most is, and this is not objective, but it's a lost opportunity for my team, because I was in the airport at that fake Irish bar, sinking frothies, right? And
Yeah.
I had my ex line up for the plane because we were actually 4 goals up at halftime. And Hawkins was suspended and we gradually fell apart, and the rest is history. But I can't help but feel like they were weak as piss when they made the grand final. So I think your point that they weren't exactly favoured going into this game. They weren't. They came from 6th all the way up. They were a dud, a lame duck candidate, where for some reason they had really clear weaknesses in what they were doing. And I feel like most Victorian teams inside the top 8 would have knocked them off that day at the G. And I feel like we would have knocked them off easily, and I would have gotten fucking hammered on Bintangs if that happened. It would have been a
Let's
great
stop saying
time.
big tank. You're making me sick.
And I don't know if on a Bintang's barley. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're not here for endorsements. So yeah, I think that the talent's there, but you know, they remind me of Mark Jackson's Golden State Warriors, where I think coaching is a big problem here. And you've seen that Brad Miller and there's a couple of other guys, they're basically cleaning out the assistants. And Leon Cameron's lucky to keep his job, in my humble opinion. And part of it is that I think that he's failed.
How long has he been there now?
Mm,
I'll look it up.
I feel like he's had a good 5 years. But it's not just Cameron's fault, because they've had a heap of high draft picks, and what tends to happen is they end up having to let go of some players, and it feels a lot like franchise mode or My League in 2K, where you get in rookies, they do their rookie deal, and then you on trade them again, and you like rinse and repeat. But here's a
2014.
So he's had 6 years. Here's a stat for you. So the situation right now is 6 players take up just over a third of their salary cap. And they've got, and this is also what's in the pipeline. Josh Kelly has the North Melbourne supporter, you'd be familiar with this bloke, who has long wrestled with the idea of coming home to Victoria. He's 1 year into a 2-year deal. But here's the thing that I think I was really surprised to find out as well. He has a trigger clause to extend his deal, wait for it, by a further 8 years, which would take him to 10 years in total at close to $1 million a season. So
I did not know about that trigger. I knew Caniglio had a massive deal. I didn't know about that with Kelly.
So then that begs the question, right? That you've got Zach Williams, who's walked out in the club, and you've got Aiden Core, who's quit the club effectively. Well, I don't want to say quit. They've exercised their right to free agency. And Williams has to accept, if you want to stay, significantly less money. And to actually fit in with their salary cap, he'd be looking at $200,000 to $300,000 a year to stay loyal.
I'm assuming these guys are restricted.
They are, but here's the thing: is that GWS is so restricted with their salary cap that any significant offer they won't match. They've really got their hands tied. So if and when Cameron, because Jeremy Cameron, they'd be absolutely silly to let him go. If Cameron resigns, they'll essentially have 5 players earning the best part of $1 million per season. And you got Canelio, who signed for 7 years, and Lockie Whitfield signed, and Toby Green's all going to be at the club till at least 2024. But here's the question: here's the problem. At the end of 2021, these are your free agents. So imagine you're the list manager at GWS. You have no money left, and these are your free agents. Tim Turano, Jacob Hopper, Himmelberg, Perryman, Caldwell, Haitley, Tom Green, Lockie Ash are free agents. So what do you do?
Well, one of the benefits of being in an AFL-like system, like you brought up in NBA 2K, where a year before we're about to lose them, we trade them for a number one draft pick and just go for the same thing. The benefit of being in an AFL system is, depending on how much these guys are paid to move away, the gold GWS are most likely going to get a first or a second round pick for that. And they're going to have this and right now, because they have all that talent, they're going to have this constant cycle for probably the next 4 or 5 years of moving guys out, getting a high draft pick. The difference is that as some of these guys will not get, as you said, because GWS are hamstrung with the amount of money that they owe players, that means other clubs don't need to necessarily offer as much to move these other kids away. And therefore, the picks are going to become less and less. It'll be second rounders, third rounders, and it's going to be harder for them to replace talent for talent like, which they've been able to do since they've come into the league. So the question is, if I was a list manager, what do I do? This is what's hard because, like, what do GWS want to be as a football club in terms of the way they play? Do they have all this midfield talent, but they clearly lack motivation to defend. They don't chase. They don't go after it. So if you're going to do that, you might as well be a club that sits everybody back and then just propels forward. The problem is, it sounds like the way that they're playing is they actually sit everybody back and then try and, it's almost like showing off with their skills. It's like, we have this many talented guys, we'll just pick apart everybody. But you also have all that pace in that talent. So I don't know why you don't use the pace. And I feel like over last year with the rule changes and then coming into this year with the hub and everything, they haven't taken advantage of the open space that the game now has.
Yeah, I just had a thought then that they've clearly got the list to compete, to contend. There's no reason that they shouldn't be contending. And I was just thinking that this has been a really disappointing year for them. And they remind me of Geelong 06. Can they make a dramatic turnaround next year?
What's going to change in the club?
Well, I guess it comes down to you remember the famous, what they call like honesty sessions or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that, they're done to death. I'm not saying that's the thing, but they have all the tools, is what I feel. And I reckon that Cameron may have lost the group because it's a long season to sit through playing ugly footy. And Cameron came from the Hawks, and they had the whole tough footy, unsociable Hawks and all that sort of thing. Is he trying to do a game style that doesn't work with the players he has? I don't know, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right?
Yeah.
A bit like North Melbourne this year, doing the same thing and you're not changing anything. Is it time for them to go, all right, this game plan doesn't work? Or is it like, 2K, where you've got a point guard who's clearly pace and space and your coach is grit and grind? Is there a mismatch in that sense? Because it seems that, like, as frustrated as I get with Chris Scott, it doesn't matter who's on our list. We will be competitive every single year. We keep bringing in new players and players from other clubs and all this sort of thing. And it's like, I think the coaching staff around the head coach, it's not just the head coach, clearly the assistants are not the sharpest tools in the shed either. And they could move a few of those on. But fresh voices are really they're a really powerful thing. Because it's like your mum nagging you. You stop listening, right? But then your auntie tells you to do something, and you think, oh, I probably should do that. You know, because it's a voice you're not used to hearing. And you see it with behavior with kids where they don't listen to their parents, but when someone they don't really know that well, like a teacher or something, says something, they kind of the behavior is different. So is it that everything that Cameron has preached, because he's had 6 years, how many more ideas does he have to pull this exact same list? Probably a list that won't be as good next year. The window is not going to stay open forever. When you think about some of the talent that's left, like I know Jonathan Patton's had problems with injuries, but he had all the hallmarks of being, a top 5 forward in the game, a superstar forward, and they've let him go. So it's all well and good that, say, Tirano and Hopper and Himmelberg and all these sort of people leave the club. But then if these people are only at the club for 2 or 3 years, they're going to end up with a situation where the players they do keep will get closer to 30. And then the players coming in are going to be like 18, 19, 20, 21 before they leave. And they're not going to have that middle band of players. And I think in footy, that really matters to have a spread across your list. Whereas in, say, NBA, if you've got like, a Luca or whoever, they can be, you've seen like, I know it's off topic a little bit, but the NBA, the Western Conference, Eastern Conference Finals, some of the players like the Miami Heat series versus the Celtics, the players who were dominating, like Tatum and some of the other, like Bam, I can't remember how you say his last name, Adebayo or something.
Yeah.
They're all 22, 23 years old. So in that sport, it's okay that, they've still got vets that are coming like Iguodala and there's another one I've forgotten the name of. But anyway, Crowder, Jay Crowder, my man. Is that they're going to have to do something where they're going to need to find blokes who are, and to use it like sport video game ratings, there's 76, 77, 78 overall players who will take to 300,000, 350,000. Like you look at Richmond's model. They do pay a lot to Dusty and Rewalt and Lynch and a few of those. But it's on your club to then find diamonds in the rough to make up the numbers. Like Sydney Stack on a rookie wage. I think it's Pickett, Marlon Pickett. And that guy that had spent time in prison last year who came in and played, like I think his first game might have been in a grand final, I'm not sure. But
It's like half their roster, isn't it?
yeah, you've either got to find older players like you do in the NBA, players who play for the minimum, who are chasing a premiership, or you've got to be able to find diamonds in the rough. And like, take Geelong. Menegolo is a mature age. Podsiadly is a mature age. Tom Stewart's come in a little bit older. And you look at some of the players where if your culture is somewhere people want to be and you're actually contending, that's half the battle to get cheap players that'll perform. But if you're this club that hasn't done anything yet and you're handing out $1 million deals, you can only hand out so many of them. And you look at like sustainability. Like I know I've talked about my club a lot here, but Geelong, and we'll talk about Hawthorn as well. They flat out say no to deals more than 800-900K because they know that they need to spread the money. And, let's pull San Antonio into this. They just don't play cats that much. Like you pay Duncan or you pay whoever, just like Dusty or whoever, you choose 1 or 2 guys, maybe 3, who you're really going to pay. But even then, they're better off being homegrown because to get people to change clubs is like an auction. You're going to pay overs to get them in more often than not in their prime. And this solution of like, you see Carlton, you take like a little look at Carlton's model. Carlton may as well go buy tickets. That's how much they want to take shortcuts. They never want to develop players. They're always trying to buy players. And even lower grade players. Like I saw yesterday that Darcy Lang, who, he couldn't get a job.
500,000 a year.
I don't know what they were paying Darcy Lang. And even Melbourne, like Shannon Burns. It reminds me, I heard about recently, I think his name's Jack Graham, the Richmond bloke.
Yeah.
And Jack's looking at making some coin and, good on him. Go get that bread. But just because Jack Graham performs well in Richmond's system doesn't mean that he's going to come carry the load at a new club. And not to discount Pat Mills, but I think this was very much some of Paddy's thinking of in the Spurs system, he was a really good player. But had he have taken a deal with New York or someone like that, he might not have been able to replicate that. And I think we've seen that in the AFL where Hawthorn's also kind of, I'm going to call it the overflow. The B grade players who will replace them, and we're better off not paying them. And that's not to say they're not getting a good deal, because if you're like, let's be real, not everyone's a superstar. But if you're a solid AFL player and you get to play for a premiership contender and you get to even play in a premiership, you'd be grateful for that. And, you think that when you go over, I think it's 180,000 or a little more, tax rate's 45%. So if you take 300 grand or let's just say instead of 300 at Geelong, you take 600 at Carlton. You're going to lose half of that in the first place anyway to play in a team that's probably not going to do anything. And then what, is your career over after that contract ends? Like, you got to weigh out what your priorities are. And I think what really goes against GWS is that most of their talent's not from there. But a lot of evidence I'm hearing, and I don't have a stat for it, but for people I know who work in, say, corporate Sydney, and from when I drove to Sydney a week before lockdown, is I saw billboards in the suburbs of between Wollongong and Sydney for kids to play footy, real footy, not rugby, real footy, right? And I remember when I went on a tour, I was on it was like a top deck Kentucky type of thing in Europe, and there was some people who worked in like corporate Sydney. They're saying all their colleagues' kids are playing Aussie rules because not everyone's a jock rough and tumble, let's wrestle on the ground rugby player. And they were saying, and these were people from Sydney, they were asking me because they're about Melbourne, they're like, oh, like, what do you think? And so the growth is happening on the ground. As much as it looks like the AFL's pumping millions in and we haven't seen a return as such, there's a lot more like you see with like the women's leagues as well. The interest at grassroots level is really high. So I think in 10, 20 years, you're going to see a lot more homegrown talent for those Sydney teams. But for now, the reason I think that Zach Williams hurts so much is he was an academy product mentored by Sheedy. And I think they expect, like, you put it's like they put potential on him for 3 or 4 years and then he's left. I have to admit, I personally don't know who he is on the field because I don't really watch a lot of GWS. But you see, like, say, a Dylan Shield, because I've seen more of Essendon play this year. That's certainly a topic for next time, Essendon. It's a whole episode in itself. But they've leaked so much talent that is just unfathomable for like any Victorian club.
Yeah, well, a lot of that has got to be with the amount that are offered by all these other clubs. But I'll let you have a drink. I'll let you have a sip because I reckon you went on almost 10 minutes straight there with no breath, nothing. But I think the one thing, because you brought up a lot, so I'll just touch on probably the major thing that I think it is the culture argument that you made. So with the reason why I mentioned that is, like, you always talk about, like, the club needs a bit of culture, needs to bring culture, and they're like, if you bring these guys from Geelong and Hawthorn because they've been around culture and they can bring it into the club. The real way that you bring culture into a club is that you have guys that have been there for such a long period of time and they're telling the people coming in, like, this is who we are. You can't have a guy. That's why it's always really weird when someone who's been in the league 3 years comes to a new club and suddenly they're like a captain of the club. And I'm like the whole point is that you have guys that are telling you what this club is, not this is what we'd like it to be necessarily. And if you have guys at GWS that are constantly just cycling cycling throughout the list, you're not going to be able to build that. Like, how in 2 or 3 years' time, how many guys are going to be on that list and say, "Oh, let me tell you about the first few years of this club getting off the ground"? You're not going to be able to, because there's only going to be like 1 or 2 guys. You're not going to be able to say, like, this is where we were in 2014 and this is where we're at now. You might have Jeremy Cameron, and even some of the other guys like Kelly and all that didn't come into a little bit later. So, sometimes while maybe it's not best for, like, maybe they're not the best player to keep around, but sometimes you know who the leaders are and it's worth keeping them around to help bring people into the club, even if they're not Jeremy Cameron type talent and whatnot. Because if you're just going to go get the money, you're going to get money wherever you are. If you're that talented, you're going to get enough to support yourself. But yeah, I think culture is the biggest thing that you touched upon there, which
Well, what's the fabric of the club if you people have got like, it's become almost like doing, like the college program, go do a year, but it's like 2 years really.
Well, think about, like, let's say 2 or 3 years' time, let's say Selwood and Dangerfield aren't at Geelong anymore, right? They've retired or whatnot. You're going to have guys like Guthrie, Duncan, Stanley to an extent, but a lot of guys around the ground that went through this cycle with leaders and are like, this is who Geelong are, this is what we need to be, and that will just carry on. That's why I kind of have hope. I have hope for North Melbourne, because you have guys like Zeeble, Cunnington, Goldstein, who are all still there, Tarrant, who are all still there. They went through some bad lost seasons. They went through prelim finals. Like, they know enough to be able to help guys coming in and say, this is who North Melbourne are. Like, the thing where I think at North Melbourne, they have this thing where if you are the number 9, you need to learn about all the number 9s that have been in the club's history. And you read up about it and you learn about it. Where that's them trying to say, this is who the shin boners are, this is what it is. The stuff like that you need to incorporate into a team to be able to do that.
Yeah, and the fact they have two top 10 picks, I mean, in an ideal world, they nail both. And if they both turn out to be Jets, this is a completely different conversation in 12 months.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Even if they nail one of those, it's a totally. But we have seen that draft picks are no guarantee.
No.
How many picks have like Melbourne had over the years? And you look at the clubs like Hawks and Cats and to an extent Collingwood. Quite a few Melbourne clubs have been able to kind of cycle vets through and stay on top. You look at Geelong's highest draft pick, I think, was Cockatoo, who didn't work out. When I say didn't work out, he hasn't worked out yet. And the next highest pick, I think, was 16 or 17. They picked up Myers, but everyone else has been later than that. So I don't think it's necessarily scouting. I think it's player development. And when you said about culture and the people you have around your club, generally, if someone's like a chemistry guy or a good club man, like I would expect Harry Taylor to go into some sort of role with the Cats in retirement. You think having someone like him around who is not a knucklehead would be very good for the club. I don't think that Gary will hang around. I don't know. But when you're saying those guys, you need those guys around, even if their value is a bit more intangible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that it'd be interesting to see what they do with Goldstein and Higgins in particular. But what do you think they should do with Brown?
Well, we're getting off the GWS topic, but well, essentially with Brown, whatever happens with him, wherever he goes, we will essentially get a number 1 pick for him. And when I say number one pick, it's normally the first pick after your own first. So our own first would be, what was that?
You got number 2, so that would be
3. So
the
we would
thing
have
is-
pick 2 and pick 3.
it's based on how much he gets paid in the new club. So the thing
Yeah,
about
but it's also what that, I think we can look into it as we get more into the off season, but I think it also takes into consideration with that amount of money, how is that in the top 10% of our salary, which, because we have such a war chest at the moment, that he would probably fall in that. So we would get a number 1 pick. We'd get a first rounder for it. So we'd end up with pick 2 and 3, and then possibly 10.
it is based on how much he gets paid, but it's how much where he falls in the pay bracket of his new club, not his old club. And I don't know, did he have a knee issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's going to command, like, he may be facing a 1-year deal to prove himself.
Yeah,
Because-
I don't know. That's a whole nother topic. We can talk about that another day. We should.
Yeah.
Anyway, GWS not good enough. That's kind of the.
I think they've just the bottom line of GWS is they haven't managed their money. I think that it would have been smarter to maybe let a couple of those players that are paying a lot of money hit restricted free agency and see what the market would have actually have paid them. Because if they're paying them $1 million, there can't be, like, if they've got 6 players and $1 million, how many clubs out there are handing out $1 million? Like, let's say even half of them, they did get paid $1 million and you let them go. But then the rest of them didn't. The rest of them got offered 700 each. Like, so then that's 300 each you've saved, 600 grand you've saved. I would have been prepared to let some of them test the market a little bit more. I know that some people get their feathers ruffled a bit over that, but it's almost like daring them to go find out.
Even Richmond only have 3, I think. They have
Yeah.
Lynch, Dusty, and maybe was it Rewald or Coach?
I think they haven't really decided on who's part of their spine. And I think Jeremy Cameron, yeah. Canelio, I guess so. But decide who your top 3 or 4 players are, and everyone's surplus to that outside of their pay bands.
It's not like it's hard to find a midfielder these days, you know.
No,
Yeah, really.
I mean, I'd take care of your key back, your key forward, and everyone else. I would be playing pretty. I know they probably are playing. I don't want to give them too much credit, not enough credit to say they aren't playing hardball, because it's the players' managers that put a number on their head. But you know, something's only worth what people are willing to pay. And I don't think that many Melbourne clubs, let's just say, Kelly, that North Melbourne said, yeah, we will pay you $1 million. I'd be daring some of these players to actually go to that club and play for a cellar dweller for that money. Because they don't want to. And some of it's leverage. You know, it's like the part of the reason sometimes you negotiate with a new club is to get your old club to give you what you want.
Yeah.
And in other words, like poker, I'd be calling their bluff on some of them. Caldwell, Jai Caldwell. I don't even know who that is. I watch a lot of footy. I don't know who that is. He sounds more like a bloody blacksmith to me. Jackson Haitley. Who is that? The only ones on this list, I know who Toronto is, I know who Hopper is, Himmelberg, and I know who Perryman is. The other blokes, I think that if I don't know who they are and I watch footy every weekend, then you can probably find them in the draft. New ones on rookie deals.
There'd be guys that you'd get that another club would get them away for like 300,000 or something with match day payments or whatever.
And the other thing is, I'd be thinking about whether they're front ending and back ending. Like, I know they know these things, but obviously, if they knew it that well, they wouldn't be in this mess. And I'd be thinking about, like, say you decide that Himmelberg or Toronto, you really want to keep him. Can you back end that deal? like kick the can down the road a bit, where some of the bigger deals you currently have will end or be on less.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like this stance they're taking, where there was someone before Zach Williams, someone earlier. Oh, it was Core, where they cracked the shits in the hub and they had the list manager kind of read the riot act to the group of, you know, don't do this. But they're not high school kids. Giving them a spray about money is a bit rich. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's like if you were offered triple your salary at Telstra, Danny.
She's
Um,
that failing brand.
you'd have to think about it. You'd have to think about it for triple your salary.
Nah,
Yeah.
still, I don't think I would. I really don't.
What about? But we're talking blokes, right? Say they come off a rookie deal. Say they come
It's
off.
different. It's different to kids like coming out of high school and you're like you're going to get this amount of money, and they may have been working during high school at like Safeway or Woolworths or something for $20 an hour or $25 an hour or something, and then oh by the way, do you want to earn $180,000 a year? And then
Yeah, or
possibly more.
we're saying like these deals, when you come out a rookie deal, a lot of them are between about 100, 150 grand, right?
Yeah.
And if the deal is that, oh, you stay here, we'll give you 200 or 250. But if you go to North Melbourne, you'll get 700. Like,
Yeah.
the thing is that North can only afford to do that how many years? Like, there's got to be some players you're just going to have to let go, get the draft. Because once it's like that expression Dallas used to have about keeping their powder dry. They don't want to spend their money on the wrong guy, and they end up with nothing in the end. And there are only with the Victorian clubs, they probably have money to buy per se one free agent a year, and I don't think like with this group, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. Are there 8 slots, high paying slots in Melbourne? With COVID that just happened.
You almost got to add 200,000 to try and get anyone away from their club these days. But GWS is going to be a whole other scenario because all the clubs know that GWS have a salary cap issue, so they can use that. But normally it's like you add 200,000 to whoever it is to try and get them away, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But then the question is, do you want to be paying $700,000 for a $500,000 guy?
Yeah. I know this isn't on the rundown, but some of the retirements that are coming up at the Cats, it's going to be interesting that they've got. I think Harry Taylor is done. That's a prediction. Harry's done. Gary's done.
Is this a new topic?
It's not on the rundown, but yeah, okay.
No. Wow.
Okay,
Job
so
retirements.
at the Cats, I think some of their retirements coming up. Got Harry, who can, he could barely chase anyone at full. I think he's really laboured this year. I think he's done. Henderson's done. Ablett's done. And Ablett wouldn't, as much as Ablett wasn't on a high salary, he wouldn't have been playing for peanuts. And there's at least 3 or 4 blokes that were earning. They weren't rookie listed as such, and they were earning half decent coin. So I think that one of the wild cards in this off season is actually going to be them, because there's certainly some vets that they could bring in. Now I know like Paul Couch has been mentioned and a few others, but what makes me think looking at this list is, and also the other thing is because we haven't had a lot of draft picks, we don't exactly have that many high priced rookies who have had great seasons coming up looking for a lot of money. The thing with GWS is because most of their list is young players, they kind of all come out of contract at the same time. I know we're gonna have
quick succession.
Yeah, so like while they're gonna have to pay Myers, I think that it's be interesting in a year or two. I think that Stanley, as soon as they discover someone who can ruck, Stanley's spotting that 22. Where is he gonna go? I think Radagoli is going to come on. Stanley's going to go, but I think that people often complain and go, "Oh, Geelong doesn't have a salary cap," because people keep going to them. But I think it's that effect of a contender, you can get the vets in on cheap deals. And I'm interested to see who that is this offseason.
I have a feeling it's going to be just Taylor, and you'll probably move on Jenkins as well.
Mm.
See, Ablett, I think, is that they'll let him decide. Is this? I'm trying to remember. Is this the ending of that initial Gold Coast contract? Because you guys were paying an amount of the money off his contract with the Gold Coast money.
Very said he's got to retire.
Yeah, I think he doesn't want to go down like he doesn't want to go out playing 10 games a season type thing.
Yeah, look, I think Ablett, even when he didn't miss games from injury. He missed games because of family issues when he left after that.
Yeah.
And I think the other one whose deal is going to who's going to be significantly cheaper very soon is Selwood. Selwood,
Yeah.
he didn't look great against the Swans on the weekend. And he's starting to have hamstring problems. So he's got another season, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's on significantly reduced money as well.
Yeah, I think the way that they'll operate, they'll sort of keep one of the legends there a year longer than they probably should. Pay them a little bit, pay them less money type thing, and then they'll send them off. So, if like Taylor's last year really should have been last year. So they'll keep him around for this year, and then they'll sail him off. I think they'll. Jenkins is more of like a D-list here. I don't think he's necessarily retiring, but he didn't get on the field or anything like that. But then you come next year, you'll say goodbye to a couple others. But you really don't have guys that are out of it yet. I think Radaglia is being built to just kind of slide Stanley out as he moves into it, and then you bring in somebody to replace his role, which is not really replaced because he's kind of in and out of the side depending on injury and depending on what players you have available.
Yeah. The list has been in transition. Like, I know everyone's always in transition, but it seems to have had lots of vets for the past 10 years on this list. Like, there's not been a year where the teams look really young on the field. And it's like you said before, about keeping those vets around, like keeping Goldstein, Higgins around. At the moment, our equivalent has been, Harry staying another year has probably been good for having some experience around, even if he's not playing, even with the coaching and the training and sort of how you go about things. Having vets around is not a bad thing. It's having too many around.
Because I think in 2 years, then it will start being like, all right, now Tui's going to start getting moved along. Stanley's going to start getting moved along. Who else? You've already mentioned Henderson would go. 2 years' time. Yeah, like you got your Dalhouses and like guys you brought in like Gary Rowan. So in 2 years they'll be I think around 30, and then we'll start having this conversation again about then, or whether they move on. If they don't win a premiership, they might move on to other clubs just to try and get that premiership.
Gary Rowan has been a revelation. Like, it's not that often, apart from when Danger came, it's not that often a vet's come in and been such an important part of Geelong. You really notice the weeks when Rowan hasn't played, because like the main option is obviously Hawkins, but the key when the ball hits the ground, having someone as quick as Rowan and who's willing to chase, they're two different things in themselves. His work rate per possession, I think he's brought a lot to the table in his work ethic, Rowan. But so anyway, to finish up, what grade would you give them so far this year?
That's a good question.
Before we
See,
get your
you and I probably. Well, a lot of people thought that they were going to be, they might be falling out of the 8 or down near the bottom. You and I probably always had them between, say, 3 and 6, or 4 and 6. So they're about where I thought they'd be. So I'll probably give them like a B plus, because I think they've handled the things that you were worried about in previous seasons. They've changed and I think gotten better at, which is. Hawkins has been utilised so much better this year than he has in other years. Like, other years, it was how do we get the ball to Hawkins? Now it's Hawkins kicking goals and we're finding a way to use other people at the same time. Like, how many years did we talk about? It's like, well, Hawkins is down there by himself and there's no point of having a half forward anymore. We just should have small guys. Whereas now they can have sort of medium forwards there, still crumbing in front of Hawkins, and Hawkins has actually been throwing guys around better this year than what he was last year. So it's I'd give him a B plus. I think B plus is fair. We'll see how the finals go.
Yeah, I agree with that grade. So your tips this week?
Well, let's move along to the tree. All right.
So week 1, Sportsbet has the Cats and the Power at $1.90 each. So
well, I've got I just looked it up then. So Sportsbet, $1.92 for $1.88 for the Cats. Slight favourites.
Oh, I mean, like that's flip a coin.
Well, it's a 4-cent coin. Who was it? And it's at Adelaide too.
It's at Adelaide. I think it's Ken Hinkley came out today and said the last time they played is irrelevant, and of course he's got to say that because he obviously wants his team to feel confident. But you just mentioned before this about how in previous years Geelong's number one strategy was kick it to Hawkins, and when that didn't work, they really had problems kicking goals. And this year, the Power have certainly kicked it to Charlie a lot.
I will say, I think Geelong is going to win it. That being said, I think if Geelong don't win, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them than, say, Port Adelaide to get all the way to the granny. Simple thing is, like we talked about, like, just there are certain guys on your team where, like, even guys like Selwood, where we're like, are they going to be able to get on the park? Like, are they going to be able to actually make it? You got 4 games left. Can you get the best team for 4 weeks in a row on the park? And I'm not sure you can. I feel like Port Adelaide have less risk in that area, and if they lose, they'll be able to pick it up and could make it all the way back. I think Geelong will win, but it's more important for them to win this week necessarily than Port.
Yeah. So who are you tipping? You're tipping the Cats?
Tipping the Cats.
Yeah, I actually think that the Power are probably the one. I just wanted to avoid Richmond week 1. I think the Power are a lot more predictable than Richmond. Well, I mean, not that Richmond are that predictable, but I just feel that if you shut Charlie down, you significantly increase your chances. Now, you could say the same as well if you shut Hawkins down, but I feel like the load's been spread a little bit more. West Coast and Collingwood at Subiaco.
Subiaco. We've gone back in time, haven't we?
It'll always be there for me.
All right, so Collingwood don't fill me with a great sense of I think I'm going to go the home team. I think West Coast have benefited a lot by being able to just be at home most of the season, and it's a crappy time for Collingwood to have to travel all the way over, and it's going to be a handful. And if Collingwood win this week, they're definitely losing the week after. But I think West Coast are going to be too talented all over the ground. Than Collingwood.
I think that the fact that it's at Optus Stadium, not Subiaco, I mean, both of them are formidable. Both of them are formidable places to play, and at home, Eagles with a crowd as well. I'd be really surprised if they blew that. The next one, St Kilda and Bulldogs. This is a hard one to tip as well.
I'll let you go first on this one.
Well, Bulldogs have a lot of health problems at the moment with some key players. So I'm going to go the Saints.
It really is a game of which team rocks up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the fact that the injuries are a big one, and the Saints are a lot healthier.
I just feel like even just Bontempelli being in the conversation is an X factor. It's more than an X factor, but it's an X factor that don't think you could pull out of the St Kilda team.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be different, I'm just going to go with the Dogs. I think it'll be an upset. Even if I do some weird thing based on principle that St Kilda just get all these guys in 1 year and they end up making a prelim or something, that would just be annoying. So maybe some growing pains, and Bulldogs have gone through a lot of pain. So I'm gonna go Doggies. All
right, and Brisbane with their home final against Richmond.
She's all yours. You're first.
I would honestly really like to see Brisbane have a turn to advance, but I think the fact that Richmond have had a lot of games at the Gabba, that's somewhere they're familiar playing this year. But I'm going to back the hometown team for a bit of a feel-good story.
See, I'm kind of rooting for a Geelong-Brisbane granny. But if I tip Geelong going the first week, it means I have got to tip Brisbane in this one. And unfortunately, I don't think that prediction is going to come to pass. I think Richmond's going to get it on this one. I'd be real worried if I were Geelong and had to face Brisbane in that prelim, though. I think that's an issue for the Cats, especially if Brisbane are like, we lost the first week, let's go. That could be an issue. But
here's the theoretical for you. Let's say that West Coast get through to a prelim and they play Richmond. What do you think?
And the game's played at the Gabba?
Yeah.
That's... Oh, God, this is difficult.
I mean, it's not roll over.
The problem is West Coast has to get through Port. Actually, they could beat Port. They play well against Port at Adelaide if they had to play in Adelaide.
Yeah, well, we know how that's gone in the past.
Probably you're playing Western Australia. You then go over to Adelaide, and then you got to go from Adelaide up to Brisbane to play Richmond. I hate it. I just feel like Richmond's going to make it again, and I just want to throw something. But I think they...
All right, make a call so we can finish up.
Yeah, I'm going Richmond for this game.
Yeah, sadly so.
You too?
Yeah, I just think that Richmond's going to make the grand final again, and I think unless it's Port or Geelong, I reckon have the best chance.
Yeah.
But see, if West Coast gets through or Collingwood, you never know. You never know. The other teams I think are really out of the conversation are Saints and Bulldogs.
All right, well, take us out.
All right, this has been the Money Shot with Clemo and Josh.